Our first speaker today is Chris Wynne, and as you'll see, his background is in physiotherapy, now involved in a state-of-the-art facility offering robotics and virtual reality to deliver intensive rehabilitation treatment programs. Experience is very varied. I'm sure he's going to share those with us. So to get us underway, Chris, hand over to you. Thank you.
Good morning, hello. It is an honour to be speaking at such a prestigious and long-standing event, so thank you very much for having me here today. And the first one of the day as well, first one of the day in a day that you are likely to be sat still for long periods of time, which historically is terrible for your listening skills and your attention span, and incidentally it's awful for your physical rehabilitation too. So I will try and keep this as light and as snappy as possible, unlike my golf swing on the course here yesterday. That said, I feel very passionate about what I have to speak to you about today, and I have a lot to say about it, so I'll try and find a happy medium. Let's see how I go. Okay, so a little bit about me and why I'm qualified to speak to you today. I'm a neurological physiotherapist. I started life out and did my time in the NHS from around the turn of the millennium through to 2010, when I left to be the lead physiotherapist for an inpatient rehabilitation unit in Chester. I was their physiotherapist who started their service from inception, and then in 2011 I left to start the Rehab Physio. It began as a one-man band, and from then until today it's progressed to a team of specialist physiotherapists, and we run a state-of-the-art 3,500 square foot facility specialising in robotics and technology. Okay, I should also say that I run the service with my co-director and wife Jennifer, who sadly can't be with us today. But if anybody of you here are married, and particularly if you work with your wife, you will know that they are always somewhere listening and they hear everything. So it's probably a good time to say that Jennifer is a superbly skilled physiotherapist in her own right, and she does a fantastic job of helping me run the service. So, our service. We aim to deliver the best affordable specialist neurological physiotherapy using advanced technology and techniques to help our patients with complex neurological conditions and major traumatic injuries to achieve the best possible outcomes. But what does that mean for you today, and why is that relevant to this conference? Well, I've always seen a personal injury claim as being there for an injured person to give them the best possible opportunity at a life that they otherwise would have lived should this injury not have occurred to them. And for many of our clients with physical deficits relating to their injury, what that opportunity looks like, and the evidence suggests, is up to 7 hours of physiotherapy activity per day. Now, for many of you in this room that are used to reading quantum physiotherapy reports, or maybe dealing with funding requests, I'm sure that figure represents an increase in what you are used to seeing. And that is why I'm here to speak to you today. I want to speak to you as to why there needs to be a change in practice, a change in philosophy, and subsequently a change in funding as to the rehabilitation that we provide. I want to speak to you as to why we are potentially underserving our clients based on conforming to tired old routines and practices. And I want to show you what best practice physiotherapy looks like and what outcomes it can achieve. So what are we trying to achieve? Well, essentially we're trying to achieve neuroplasticity. And what that simply is our brain and our nervous system's way of regenerating and making new neural connections. And it's based upon the demands and the experiences we place upon them. But not all experiences are created equal. For neuroplasticity to best occur, the experiences need to be specific to the function we are trying to improve upon. They need to be repeated, and they need to be intensive. So, put quite simply, to be specific to the function we're trying to achieve, let's give an example. If I'm somebody who can't use my arm properly, and I want to be able to place my arm back onto a steering wheel to be able to return to driving, well then the physiotherapy exercises will be specific to that task. I would look at triceps control, motor control of the upper limb generally, shoulder stability, wrist stability, grip strength, etc., etc. They would be specific to that functional goal. Repetition. I'm sure we all know here, if the more we do something, the better we get at it. Whether it be playing the piano, whether it be a golf swing, maybe not, but so forth. The more we do something, the better we get it, and the more neural connections that are made. And then lastly, the task has to be intensive enough. If we're going to make changes on a neurological level, we need to push ourselves out of our comfort zone. And there's studies that have been released recently that show that neuroplasticity best occurs when the heart rate is raised high enough that we commonly associate with sporting activity, running, gym activity. And I want you to think about how hard that would be to achieve if you were confined to a wheelchair for most of the day, or indeed your bed. So what does the current situation look like for our patient population? Well, the governing bodies, the bodies that are put in place to make recommendations of best practice for our statutory services, such as NICE or the Royal College of Physicians, all largely acknowledge that intensity of therapy and rehabilitation is what is required to best get the outcomes for patients that we need. But they also largely acknowledge that they are not achieving that within our statutory services presently. And there's quite alarming statistics for spinal cord injury patients, many of whom will never set foot in a specialist spinal cord injury rehabilitation centre. There's also a paper released recently by the Royal College of Physicians regarding acquired brain injury, which, if you look at the bottom there, the quote of which is, "Most patients receive treatment which is inadequate, inappropriate and delayed." So for a large percentage of the population, you've come out of your inpatient rehabilitation stage potentially not receiving ample opportunity to reach the outcomes that you wish to do so. But let's say you are lucky enough to access a specialist rehabilitation unit. What can that situation look like for you then? Well, there was a study in Europe of patients over a 14-day period in a stroke rehabilitation unit, and all the patients were observed for the entirety of their time there. And of that time there, it was observed that 75% of their time was spent idle. So 75% of their time not engaging in meaningful physical activity. And when they were in a therapy session, such as an upper limb session, it was observed that they carried out 32 repetitions of movement in that therapy session. And you compare that to the current evidence, which recommends over 1,000 repetitions per session, it falls well short of the required mark. So you come out of inpatient therapy and you want to access outpatient therapy services. What does that look like? Well, I can tell you what it typically looks like. It typically looks like we'll see you once or twice a week for 6 to 12 weeks, and we'll review you after then. And that's probably private provision. If you're relying solely on statutory services, then your outpatient provision's probably less than that. I did a conference, I was very lucky enough to speak at a conference last week, and the title of which was "How Much Do You Think You Are Worth?" And if you had a life-changing injury and your world was turned upside down, would you value yourself to the tune of 1 hour of therapy per week, when the other 167 hours in that week were spent not working on trying to make yourself as good as you could be? I'd like to think that most of us would value ourselves more than that. And that's difficult for us as physiotherapists, because let's say, okay, you've got the golden ticket, you've won the lottery, I'm your physiotherapist, I know what the evidence says, I'm going to treat you for 7 hours a day, one-to-one physio, and I'm going to get you as good as you possibly can be. What happens to all the other patients queuing up at the door who require the same level of therapy? And where do I get all of those physiotherapists from to meet that need? And seriously, if you know, do tell me afterwards, because there's a national shortage. It's simply incredibly difficult. And for that reason, too long, patients have been prescribed therapy based on organisational constraints rather than what's best for the patient. And that is where our robotics and our technology comes in to try and facilitate that intensity of rehabilitation. So the evidence suggests that at least upwards from 80 hours of intensive therapy provides the best treatment outcomes. And it's all down to opportunity for practice. If you think about yourselves in the room now, if we potentially have a show of hands, who here would eat better if they had more opportunity to prepare their meals, source recipes, source ingredients, maybe plan for the week ahead? Who here would potentially look after themselves more and eat better than they do, rather than for convenience? Yeah. And then likewise, who would go to the gym more, engage in physical exercise, look after themselves more if they didn't work such long hours, and then even when they did get home after a long day at work, they had a family to look after? Yeah. And that's just relatable opportunity. And it's the same for our patients, albeit it's a different set of circumstances that they require an opportunity for. And it's a lot more difficult. So our intensive service, essentially is an 80-hour program, and that's spread over 4, 5 or 7 weeks, depending on if somebody can come in 3 days, 4 days or 5 days a week. And that equates to 4 hours of therapy per day. And that's 1 hour as a one-to-one physiotherapy session, and then a further 3 hours using specific programs, repeated programs on the robotics and the technology. We also still run our traditional neurological physiotherapy service because it's not suitable for everybody to apply that level of intensity. And there's lots of criteria as to whether someone's suitable or not. I don't have time to go into that during my talk, but we are exhibiting here this week. So if you want to come and ask me questions about that, if you have any clients in mind, I'll be more than happy to speak to you about that. And we also have our specialist rehabilitation gym. So that acts as a drop-down service for our other 2 services. So traditionally, if somebody had engaged in physiotherapy doesn't continue forever, for many different reasons, and quite a lot of people would regress and not maintain their level of progress once their physio's stopped. So we run a specialist rehabilitation gym whereby people can still access some of the specialist technology and equipment to allow themselves to keep putting positive demand through themselves. It also acts as a service for people who can't afford or don't have the means, potentially financed by a personal injury claim, to access physiotherapy, so they can still come in, and at the cost of a normal direct debit gym subscription, they can still put that positive demand through themselves and stand a better chance than they would have otherwise had. Okay, so that's all for me for now. I'm going to introduce you to Steve. Steve was a patient who engaged our intensive program in 2021. He had an incomplete thoracic spinal cord injury. Steve was never given any rehabilitation to try and progress his mobility. He was shown wheelchair skills and he was discharged home. And he, let alone the idea of entertaining rehabilitation potential. He holds a position quite high up in the NHS, and as such he's a staunch advocate for the NHS. And he was very guarded and very defensive when he came to see us. And this is his story.
After an MRI, it was identified that I had prolapsed 3 discs, T6 and L3 and L4. To cut a long story short, I had to do some complications. I was in hospital for 6 months. As I was leaving hospital, the commentary was around, you've done really well for a T6 injury. You've done really well to get where you are now. And you may see some improvement in the future, but don't live your life waiting for it to happen. Was basically the parting. Went out for a pint with my friend, and he said, "Is this it? Are you giving up?" And I remember being quite sceptical, thinking it's the first time I've ever gone outside of the NHS for care. But from the assessment and from the chat, it became very clear very quickly that this was something that I would want to want to pursue. I suppose the first thing that influenced me when I came in through the doors was that it's a big, bright sort of environment. It looks as though that you have all the new equipment and technology. The biggest thing that sort of hit me was that people were more willing to be hopeful for you. But what I have had is clinicians willing to give you their clinical view around what possibly might be around the corner for you if you work out. No one had really given me the opportunity to walk. And since I've been here, I'm on the intensive programme, and this is my 9th day. And yesterday on my 8th day, I walked across the gym here several times, supported by a hoist, but that was there as a safety net as opposed to something that was actually holding me up, and it was a very, very significant moment for me. I think my wheelchair will feature in my life, but because of my stay here, I don't think I'm going to be relying on it as much.
I think I probably did 2 intensive programs over that time, and I had a phased sort of exit that was agreed over a period of a few weeks, and when we went down to 2 days and then 1 day, it was a phased exit. So when I first came, I wasn't really weight bearing in any sort of meaningful way. I was still rolling about on the bed trying to pull my trousers up, and I didn't have any. I couldn't stand when I had to use the loo, etc. And then when I came here and had the assessment, I remember that Jen saying to me, "If you come here and do this program, you will walk." And she said, "I don't know whether that's with a frame or with sticks or with crutches," but she said, "I feel very strongly that you will walk." And at first, it took me by surprise that she had the confidence to say, "You come here and do this, and it will get you to a situation where you're walking." I got upset, to be honest with you, I by the end of the session, I actually had a degree of confidence that the Rehab Physio would get me to a different place. I'm now able to walk for several hundred meters if I needed to. I'm on my crutches most of the time, and life's not perfect by any stretch of the imagination, and I still daily have some frustrations about things that I can't do. But in the main, I'm in a position where I'm grateful and I don't know, I suppose I feel that I'm doing more than I expected to do, when I came out of the hospital. During that time, while I was here, I took my driving test again. I was classed as able to use just a normal automatic car without any alteration. And it's given me a significant degree of independence that I didn't have before. I think when I first came, I didn't have the strength in my legs. Even when I first started driving, I didn't really have the strength in my legs to fully support me. I used to back up to the seat and then swing my legs over. But as it is now, I can lift one foot up, weight bear on one leg. That goes in, and I feel, and it's strong enough to hold my weight. So yeah, great. Life's changed significantly from when I first came. I needed assistance with an awful lot of things. And in the main, I'm very independent as it speaks now. I'm able to cook and clean and wash and do all the things that everybody else does. My wife's got quite high expectations and doesn't let me get away with anything, which is great. No, I have a degree of independence that I'm able to go out and just live my life, really. Life's not perfect by any stretch of the imagination, and I still have a significant degree of frustration around the things that I can't do, but I do reflect a lot on where I was and where I am now is completely different, and I've got a significant degree of independence as a result of coming to Rehab Physio.
So Steve wasn't given an opportunity to explore walking when he left hospital, and Steve was worth more than that, and he was only able to explore that worth once he was given an opportunity to engage in intensive rehabilitation. Just a brief introduction to the robotics and technology that we do have. I'm very keen to point out to a lot of people that these aren't magic cures. They are a way of driving volume, repetition and specificity through the patients. So if you look at the Lexo gait trainer there, an average therapy session might not include any steps, but if it does, it's probably 10, 20 steps, and you can do up to 4,000 in an hour on that machine, and it is very active rather than just passive. I had a case manager speak to me at a conference a few weeks ago, and they said to me, oh yeah, we've seen one of these places, all these shiny robots, and it's all very good, but if you're not practicing it in function, what's the point? And it very much is functional. If you have somebody who has a little bit of arm movement, for instance, but they can't actually use that arm for function, well, that arm remains dormant all day. It can't produce that functional repetition, that movement. Whereas if you can move it slightly and you can have sensors which cause an active outcome in a virtual reality world, well, that hour is spent using that movement and they're getting a meaningful outcome from that. Well then, if you repeat enough, you can summate and increase that movement to hopefully get over the threshold for function. And again, just to prove that it's not just me shouting about this, the evidence to support this, of 62 trials involving 2,500 patients after a stroke in the Cochrane reviews, robotic gait training was shown to have a positive effect on gait speed, basic activity to day living. It was shown to have the biggest effect in non-ambulatory patients who can't walk otherwise. And it was shown to have a really good effect when used in a combination with traditional physiotherapy methods. And likewise, the same stands for the upper limb. And if you just have a look at the video there, that's what I talk about, the meaningful outcomes in the virtual reality. If you couldn't otherwise lift your arm up for function, but you're able to do so using the technology, and that produces a meaningful outcome in the virtual reality, these sensors can be tailored can be controlled by the amount of activity you have. So if you only have a flicker of movement, then you can elicit a positive change on the computer and gradually increase what you're doing. And similarly, the evidence would support repetitive, intensive therapy for upper limbs. So 45 trials involving over 1,500 patients. Significant improvements were shown in activities, daily living, arm function, arm strength. Robotic-assisted training increases the intensity of arm therapy, and this evidence was valued as high, so very reliable. These are the national guidelines from several different countries supporting the methods that we use. But just briefly, one more recent national guidelines from our country in 2023, if I can just quote, people with some upper limb movement or impaired mobility or balance should be offered repetitive task practice as the principal rehabilitation approach in preference to other therapy approaches, including bow bath. And I don't know if you are aware of bow bath therapy, but it's long been heralded in our industry of neurophysio as being the gold standard without really the evidence to support it, whereas this method, this volume repetition of intensity, is what is supported. And I've included this slide just because I think it's quite memorable. From a seminar in America, a quote, if you have had a stroke in the United States in 2014, you're better off if you're a rodent than if you're a human being. And that is because the study showed that rodents were observed to produce much higher repetitions of movement, 400 to 600 repetitions for upper limb extremity movements per hour, and 1,000 to 2,000 steps for gait training. So again, if you are valuing somebody in a claim, do you value them more than a rodent? It's all about repetition, volume, specificity. I'm sorry if I'm repeating myself, but as I've already said, if I'm to induce neuroplasticity in you, I have to keep repeating. Okay, so basically the outcomes of intensive rehabilitation increases the volume, the quality of therapy, provides better treatment outcomes, and achieves more sustainable improvements. And that's a summary of our treatment programs, as already stated. Very keen to point out that within our therapy programs, in our technology room and our rehabilitation gym, it's all open plan, so group therapy can occur. People are moving on off different stations at the same time, much like a circuit training principle. And what happens is many of our patients become friends and they form close bonds and they help each other move on with their onward journey. We cover a variety of conditions and all different stages. We've had somebody who had an acquired brain injury almost a year ago to the day of the London Marathon this year. He ran the London Marathon in 3 hours. Now, this is remarkable. I can't do that for everybody. I'm keen to add, he was a world Ironman athlete prior to his injury, and he's a very, very remarkable, unique character. But we've had people do that all the way down to it can be something as simple as somebody being able to get on and off the toilet again. It can make a massive difference to the independence of their life. And there's a full spectrum. It just depends on what your individual goals are. And just one last patient story. This is Wayne. Wayne won the golden ticket. He had, having suffered an awful incomplete spinal cord injury at C2 level, he managed to rehabilitate and walk out of hospital. It wasn't perfect walking, but he walked without any crutches, Zimmer frame, anything, any walking aids whatsoever. And his life was getting back on track, so much so that they phoned him up and said, come back in, we'll reattach your bowel and you'll be able to go to the toilet normally again. So everything was getting back for him. When he woke up from surgery, from having his bowel reattached, he had rip-roaring spasticity, worse than he ever did before the original, after the original spinal cord injury. This was then followed by the pandemic, where all services were stopped. He was discharged from a general surgery ward with no outpatient rehabilitation whatsoever. He was unable to walk. He sourced his own wheelchair, and then he came to access our intensive therapy service.
So I suffered a motorbike accident in March 2017. Amongst other injuries, I had C1, C2, incomplete, and spent the next 6 months in acute rehab in the NHS and made a relatively good recovery. I actually walked out of acute rehabilitation in September 2017. Unfortunately, what happened in the next 12 months, I went for general surgery in August, September 2018 to have a course to be reversed, which has led to increased spasticity and tone, which has really affected my walking pattern and knocked me off my feet. Obviously, having made a good recovery from the initial accident, I was discharged from a lot of the outpatient services, which made NHS rehabilitation hard, which has left me isolated and pretty much alone from a rehabilitation point of view. Being honest, I wasn't sure what to expect. I become pretty despondent with the whole situation. And the 1 hour a week private physio inputs I was gaining from Joe was merely maintaining my situation. I wasn't improving in any way. So, by attending an intensive block, I realised I potentially had nothing to lose and perhaps plenty to gain, so I thought, go for it. Obviously, I've had a lot of physio input from a lot of physios over the course of the last 4 or 5 years. But what set the Rehab Physio apart for me was both the staff, but also the integration of the technology within the treatment, which for me, obviously I hadn't seen anything like that before. It was a real game changer about how intense they could work you in each of his sessions, and I noticed the benefit of this from session 1. I'm still feeling the benefit today, 18 months later. But both myself and my loved ones have noticed quite significant improvements over the 18 months I've been being treated here. This doesn't necessarily transfer to a firm walking pattern, but when I look back to those early sessions when I first came to the Rehab Physio, the assessment strikes me. I was unable to get my feet flat on the floor. I came to see Chris and the team with both airfoes and elastic foot up, so I still wasn't being able to get a flat foot. And to recently now I'm mobilising my mouths quite fluently on crutches, and within my session I found recently started taking a few unaided steps, which is an obviously massive improvement from where I was 18 months ago. And I hope to continue to make improvements, and I think there's more to come. To meet the patients with different levels of disabilities and injuries, and able to share both my experiences with them, and they're able to share their experiences with me. But not just us as patients, but also the environment Delegates have created to be able to interact with other patients' families and loved ones and friends. It really has been a godsend for people like me, and I know, having spoken to other patients I now consider friends, they feel exactly the same as me, and I think it's something that's really positive, and both Jen, Chris, and all Rehab Physio should be praised for it. From what I've said to Tracy, the benefits to my mental health and the knock-on effect with confidence, social interaction, meeting like-minded people, meeting people that are in the same or a lot of times are in worse situations than myself. There's been a massive benefit for that sort of 18 to 20 months. Ideally, I'd like the ultimate goal would be to regain that level of mobility that I had in September, October 2017. Whether that's possible, I do not know. But one thing's for sure, it won't be through a lack of effort, like I try and the amount of people that can obviously benefit the way I've benefited in the last 18 months. Nobody should be able to just be forgotten about, in my opinion. Everybody should have the ability to maximise their potential.
So when considering your clients, I'd like you to think to yourselves, what do I think I am worth? If this has happened to you, would you consider yourselves worth the best possible opportunity at getting your life back on track? Thank you very much. I'm happy to take questions.
Thanks very much indeed. So if we have any questions in the room, if you could put your hand up and we will get a microphone to you. If there are any questions, just having a look. Okay, I haven't got any that are coming in here, but it's just when somebody just stretches and I go, yeah, you've got to get them.
As I say, I'm available. I've got an exhibition stand at the conference, so if you aren't attending virtually, I'm more than happy for you to come down and ask me any questions if you think of anything later.